Hannibal Barca, War Against Rome. What kind of man marches elephants over the Alps just to pick a fight with the most powerful empire on earth? Why did Rome, the iron-fisted titan of the Mediterranean, tremble at the name of a 26-year-old Carthaginian general? How did one assassination, a river full of panicked barbarians, and a siege that lasted 8 brutal months ignite one of the bloodiest wars in ancient history? This is not just a story of war. It's a tale of obsession, genius, and revenge served with a side of elephant tusks and tactical brilliance. Meet Hannibal Barca, a man born into a legacy of hatred for Rome, raised on the edge of empire, and destined to become the nightmare of the Republic. From the sun-scorched hills of Iberia to the snow-choked passes of the Alps. In this documentary, we unravel the twisted path that led to the Second Punic War, a conflict so intense, even the gods might have looked away. The year is 218 BC. Hannibal, the Carthaginian mastermind with a vendetta hotter than a Numidian desert, is racing against time. The Roman army is just 4 days away, and he's got elephants to move, mountains to cross, and Italy to invade. No pressure. No pressure. But standing between him and his alpine dream is the Rhone River, wide, wild, and guarded by the Cavaris tribe, Roman allies with a flair for dramatic riverbank fortifications. They gathered every boat in the region, built a floating barricade, and stood like bouncers at a nightclub, ready to deny entry to the Carthaginian army. Hannibal, however, wasn't about to RSVP to a frontal assault. He had a plan, a cunning, sneaky cloak and dagger kind of plan. On the third night, while the Cavares were busy polishing their spears and practicing their war cries, Hannibal sent a detachment under Hanno, son of Bomilcar, a man whose name sounds like a villain in a soap opera, but whose tactical skills were anything but melodramatic. Hanno and his troops marched 40 kilometers north under cover of darkness, crossed the river like ghosts, and rested for a day. Then on the second night they moved again, silent, swift, and sneaky, until they were behind the Cavaris camp by dawn. The trap was set. All that was missing was the signal. At sunrise, Hanno lit a smoke signal. Not the kind that says, "We're having a barbecue," but the kind that screams, "Unleash the chaos." Hannibal, ever the showman, was one of the first to cross the Rhone. His men roared with approval from the western bank, probably chanting something like, "Hani, Hani, Hani," as their general stepped into the swirling waters. The Cavaris, seeing the Carthaginian boats approaching, formed a line on the eastern bank, ready for battle. But just as they braced for impact, Hanno struck. His troops looted and burned the Cavaris camp like it was a clearance sale at a Roman market. Then he charged the Gauls from behind. The Cavaris, caught between Hannibal's boats and Hanno's blades, panicked. Their formation collapsed faster than a poorly built aqueduct. By midday, the river crossing was complete. The Carthaginians had won without a proper battle. The elephants, however, took another day to cross, because apparently elephants don't do rivers without drama. As Hannibal's army gathered on the eastern bank, friendly Gallic messengers from the Po Valley arrived with urgent news. A Roman fleet was nearby. Hannibal sent his Numidian scouts, who promptly stumbled into a Roman Gallic scouting party. Awkward. Both generals, Hannibal and Publius Cornelius Scipio, now knew each other's location. Scipio rushed north to intercept Hannibal, but when he arrived at the Rhone, he found nothing but an empty camp and some elephant-sized footprints. Hannibal was already marching toward the Alps, determined to beat winter like it owed him money. Back in Iberia, things were unraveling faster than a toga in a windstorm. Scipio handed the Iberian campaign to his brother, Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio Calvus, a man with a name so long it needed its own scroll. Calvus disembarked at Emporiae, where Greek trading cities and Iberian tribes welcomed the Romans like long-lost cousins with shiny armor. But Carthaginian control was slipping. Hanno, left behind with too few troops and too many problems, only learned of the Roman arrival when Calvus was practically knocking on the Ebro River's door. Hanno sent word to Hasdrubal, who began marching north with 8,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry. But Hanno, perhaps fueled by pride or poor judgment, didn't wait. He marched out with 10,000 troops to meet Calvus's 20,000-strong army. It went about as well as a goat trying to headbutt a war elephant. Calvus crushed the Carthaginians. 6,000 were killed, 2,000 captured, including Hanno himself. Hasdrubal arrived too late and too underpowered to fight, so he turned to guerrilla tactics, launching coastal raids that harassed Roman sailors and halved the fleet's effectiveness. Still, Rome now controlled Iberia north of the Ebro, a devastating blow to Carthage. The region would become a launchpad for future Roman incursions into Carthaginian territory. While Iberia burned and Rome celebrated, Hannibal was already climbing the Alps. With elephants, infantry, and a dream of Roman ruin, he was about to turn the Italian peninsula into a battlefield that would echo through history. The Second Punic War was no longer a distant threat. It was a storm rolling in from the mountains, led by a man whose name would haunt Roman senators for generations. With the Roman army just 4 days away, Hannibal wanted to avoid a set-piece battle with the Gauls, eager to press on towards the Italian peninsula as soon as possible. But on the opposite riverbank, encamped was the army of the Cavaris tribe, a Roman ally. They gathered all their boats and built a barrier on the riverbank in preparation to contest the Carthaginian crossing. But Hannibal devised a cunning plan. On the third night, under the cover of darkness, he sent a flanking detachment under the command of Hanno, son of Bomilcar. Some 40 kilometers, 25 miles north, Hanno crossed the river and rested his troops for 1 day. On the second night after leaving the Carthaginian camp, Hanno's detachment again moved during the night, eventually deploying behind the Cavaris camp at dawn. The trap was set. Early next morning, Hanno used smoke to signal Hannibal to start crossing the Rhone. As the Carthaginian vessels were lowered into the massive river, Cavaris' army formed a line on the opposite riverbank. Hannibal was one of the first to cross, to the roars and cheers from his men on the western bank. As the Carthaginians started disembarking on the eastern riverbank, Hanno sent a part of his force to loot and destroy the Cavaris camp, while he proceeded to charge at the Gauls near the river. The Cavaris were stunned by the flanking maneuver, and they began fleeing the field in panic, unable to cope with Hannibal's perfectly synchronized attacks. With the Gauls scattered, the battle was soon over, and the Carthaginians hastily proceeded to cross the river. Most cities and the Iberian tribes in the region welcomed the Romans. But even prior to the arrival of Roman troops, the Carthaginians began to lose control over the conquered region, as Hanno's force wasn't large enough to conduct offensive operations. What's worse, Hanno only learned about the Roman arrival when Scipio Calvus was well on his way towards the Ebro River. He sent word to Hasdrubal, who began marching north with 8,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry. But, instead of waiting for Hasdrubal, Hanno marched out with 10,000 troops to meet the 20,000-strong Roman army. Unsurprisingly, Scipio Calvus easily crushed the Carthaginians, killing 6,000 and capturing 2,000 troops along with Hanno himself. Once Hasdrubal arrived, he didn't have enough troops to meet the Romans in battle, so he launched fast-moving raids along the coast. Carthaginian raiders killed many Roman sailors as they were foraging, reducing the effectiveness of the Roman fleet by half. Nevertheless, Rome now had full control over Iberia north of the Ebro River, a serious blow to the Carthaginian war effort. Moreover, northern Iberia would become a base of operations for Roman incursions into Carthaginian territory south of the Ebro River. Meanwhile, having marched his forces over the Alps, Hannibal would soon turn the Italian peninsula into a war zone, in a campaign that would elevate him to a general of legendary status. It all began with a murder. Not the sneaky political kind, but the stabby kind. General Hasdrubal the Fair, Carthage's top dog in Iberia, was assassinated by a Celtic slave. No one saw it coming, except maybe the slave, who clearly had a flair for chaos. Enter stage left, Hannibal Barca, age 26, with the charisma of a rock star and the strategic mind of a chess grandmaster. The Carthaginian army didn't hesitate, they handed him the reins. And Hannibal? He didn't waste time doodling battle plans in the sand. He had one goal: Rome must fall. But first he had to clean up Iberia, because you can't march on Rome with half your backyard still throwing tribal tantrums. In 221 and 220 BC, Hannibal launched 2 campaigns that were so successful, even the rivers started whispering his name. Carthaginian influence surged past the Tagus River like a well-oiled war machine. But on his way back to New Carthage, the Iberian tribes, led by the Carpetani, decided to throw a surprise party. Not the fun kind with cake, but the kind with spears and fortified riverbanks. They blocked his path, dug in by the Tagus, and waited. Classic rookie mistake. Hannibal didn't charge in like a bull in a toga shop. No, he built a camp, lit fires, and made it look like he was settling in for a cozy night of marshmallows and war stories. Meanwhile, his scouts found a sneaky river crossing to the southeast. In the dead of night, Hannibal pulled off a military magic trick. He left a few men to keep the fires burning, and led the rest of his army on a stealthy flanking maneuver. By sunrise, he was behind the Iberians, pretending to retreat. The Iberians, thinking they'd caught him running scared, charged into the river like it was Black Friday at the Forum. But Hannibal unleashed his cavalry midstream. The Iberians, chest-deep in water and dreams of glory, were cut down like wheat in a storm. And then came the elephants. Yes, elephants. The ancient tanks of Carthage. Those who made it across were trampled like grapes in a wine festival. The Carpetani coalition crumbled. Hannibal pursued the fleeing warriors, routing them completely. The Tagus River ran red, and Rome started sweating. Before you vanish into the shadows of history, if you crave stories that stir your soul, ignite your curiosity, and leave you breathless with wonder, Dark Crown Chronicles is your new sanctuary. By subscribing and turning on notifications, you're not just joining a channel. You're stepping into a realm where forgotten legends rise, ancient battles roar, and the echoes of empires whisper secrets long buried. What do you gain? Cinematic deep dives into the minds of conquerors and rebels. Early access to every new saga we unveil, and a front-row seat to the drama, intrigue, and brilliance of the ancient world. So hit that subscribe button, tap the notification bell,